Formerly cheerful and lively Rachel Burkheimer experienced a tragic loss that plunged her into the depths of despair and hopelessness. But just when she began to rediscover the joy of living, she fell into a trap cunningly laid by people who had sworn to love and protect her. How could it come to pass that an 18-year-old girl was horrified to witness people she trusted unreservedly digging her grave? Rachel Berkheimer's father jokes that he used to be an answering machine for his daughter. A sociable, active, and athletic girl, she easily made new friends and was the life of any gathering. Everything changed in August 2001 when Rachel was in her senior year at Everett High School in Everett, Washington. She was crushed by the loss of her 6 best friends in unrelated tragedies, ranging from drowning to accidents. One of these incidents completely broke Rachel when she lost her closest friend, Corey Haynes, in a terrible car accident. They weren't a couple, but they had been friends for many years. Bill Burkheimer, Rachel's father, explains they were like brother and sister to each other. Corey was an amazing young man. He knew her better than anyone else on earth. And after losing Corey, Rachel's life went downhill. She had difficulty concentrating, experienced depression, and had to see a psychologist. She transferred from Marysville Pilchuck High School to an alternative educational institution and eventually dropped out altogether. She also quit her job at a local pizzeria. Corey's mother says that after the accident, Rachel often called her to check in. She loved leaving gifts, some sculptures for the garden or little angel statues on her doorstep. But the spark of happiness that had illuminated Rachel's life had now vanished. Parents, older sister, and friends all made many attempts to help Rachel. Unfortunately, they were all unsuccessful. "We witnessed a complete transformation in front of our eyes," recalls Megan Hoang, Rachel's sister. Rachel shut herself off from her entire family. Now she was living life in complete despair and started hanging out with a new group of guys who were very different from her previous circle. One of them, in particular, will have the most dramatic impact on her life. Rachel met 20-year-old John Anderson at a school party. Many advised her against befriending this guy. Anderson had been in jail several times and was a member of a poorly organized and diverse street gang. The gang was in its early stages and had a rather ridiculous name, the Northwest Mafia. The guys stole illicit substances, sold some of them, but mostly used them themselves. They had no other ambitions in life. They would get together to play video games and simply waste their lives. Rachel's father learned about Anderson's presence in his daughter's life when he received a $640 phone bill on a not-so-fine day. He looked at it and couldn't believe it was sent from the prison in Shelton, Washington. It turned out that John Anderson, once again, found himself behind bars and had called his daughter many times, as well as written her frighteningly obsessive letters. Bill was afraid for his daughter and immediately tried to talk to her. But she kept saying that she saw another side of John and that he wasn't as others perceived him to be. However, the smitten Rachel would soon receive a serious shock from the cruel reality. Anderson was dangerously jealous and domineering, to the extent that he would sniff Rachel's clothes and hair to find out if she had been with another guy. Megan saw bruises on Rachel and suspected that Anderson was capable of hitting her. Finally, Rachel had enough of this treatment and stopped answering her boyfriend's calls or reading his letters after several months. However, he wasn't planning to stop pursuing her. In letters from prison in December 2001, Anderson wrote that she was the best thing that ever happened to him. He asked her to give their relationship another chance and even mentioned marriage. "You are my world, my everything. You make my heart beat, and you make me act and think," he wrote. "I don't think I can or ever want to live without your love." Meanwhile, he became increasingly irritable and angry when she didn't respond. In the opinion of the girl's father, Anderson was particularly annoyed that Rachel was one of the few people he couldn't control. Rachel found herself trapped in a volatile relationship with Anderson, sometimes leaving him and then starting all over again. But her father doesn't think that it was only jealousy that led to what happened next. John Anderson believed that the love of his life was trying to lure him into a trap, so he decided to punish her. Several weeks before the tragedy, the girl tried to get her life back on track. Rachel's father will never forget the day she sat on the steps of their home and talked about finishing school and starting to study medicine. She was glowing, Bill recalls. And then she confessed to her father that she had met a new friend who encouraged her to return to school. They were planning to finish school together, celebrate graduation, and start over. Her new friend's name was Maurice Rivas, who would confess to her murder 2 months later. Maurice Rivas, also a member of John Anderson's gang, wanted to break ties with his old friends. Maurice was 18 and had grown up in a disadvantaged family, but he and Rachel quickly became friends because they were united by a desire to escape the empty, aimless life preferred by the gang. However, this was easier said than done. Neither the gang nor John Anderson were willing to give up what they believed belonged to them so easily. At the time of yet another breakup with John, Rachel began dating one of his best friends, J.J. Braswell, naively assuming that Anderson would swallow such an affront. Suspicions within the gang were fueled by the belief that Rachel was passing on their secrets to her acquaintances, including some of Anderson's rivals. Besides the Northwest Mafia, there were at least 2 other groups of dealers and former associates operating in the region that the gang did not approve of. Rachel maintained a friendly demeanor with all of them, making the Anderson group increasingly nervous. It's no wonder that at some point, someone hinted to the girl that she was in danger. Rachel was frightened and sought advice from her older sister Megan. She advised Rachel to stay away from Anderson but didn't believe he could really be dangerous. Deciding not to let the situation slide, on the evening of September 23, 2002, Rachel attended a gathering at the home of one of the gang members, 32-year-old Yusef Jihad. However, it wasn't exactly a typical party, just a few idlers gathering together as they often did before. Rachel went to Yusef's house with the intention of convincing her friends that she hadn't betrayed them and that they could trust her. Additionally, she felt safe in the company of Maurice, who also hadn't managed to sever ties with the gang. All the guys were sitting on the couch, chatting and laughing, when John Anderson walked into the house. Without much ado, he drew his weapon. Rachel got scared, jumped up and tried to run out of the house, but he intercepted her right at the door. Rachel fell into John Anderson's and his friend's cunning trap, and the nightmare of that night was only just beginning. Anderson grabbed the girl by her hair, hit her in the face, knocked her down, and began to beat her. 2 other guys didn't hesitate to help him. Someone turned up the music to drown out Rachel's screams. After the beating, they took Rachel to the garage, not forgetting to gag her and tie her up with adhesive tape so she couldn't call for help. After throwing the girl on the garage floor, they went to discuss what to do with her next. The gang members considered taking advantage of her vulnerability or demanding a ransom from her parents. Apparently, the guys had planned the trap, but they hadn't figured out what to do with the captive next. Unable to make such a difficult decision, they ate pizza and played video games while the girl lay on the garage floor in horror, writhing in pain. Suddenly, a ray of hope flashed before the poor girl when the homeowner and Yusef's girlfriend, Trissa Connor, returned home. Trissa walked into the house through the garage, saw Rachel bound, beaten, lying on the floor, and quietly made her way to the kitchen to get a knife and free the girl. But Anderson noticed it and thwarted Trissa's attempt to free Rachel. Trissa threatened to call the police if the guys didn't remove the girl from her garage. Unfortunately, she never contacted the police, and the flustered gang members had to stuff the captive into a black bag, which they then stuffed into the Jeep. Later, Trissa would claim that she didn't dial 911 because she was afraid for her life and the life of her daughter. The guys didn't know what to do with the girl next. They even discussed the idea of renting a hotel room where she could heal her wounds and then letting her go. But that was not meant to happen. 4 guys, including Rachel's ex-boyfriend, John Anderson, and her best friend Maurice, who had promised to protect her, drove 50 kilometers to the nearest field in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains. They decided that Rachel was Anderson's problem and that he would have to deal with her. Anderson and the other 2 guys went for shovels, while Maurice was ordered to watch the captive. As Maurice later confessed, he hesitated to open the bag in which Rachel was placed. The girl realized she was going to die and begged for it not to be drowning. In response to her plea, Maurice stated that he doubted it would go that far. If Maurice had the desire or opportunity to save the girl, he didn't take that chance. When the rest of the gang returned, the abuse and humiliation continued. Rachel made noise when the guys started taking shovels out of the Jeep. Anderson then took a shovel and struck the bag with all his might. The guys callously dug a grave for the girl with whom they had been joking and laughing just a few hours ago. Anderson and his accomplices pulled her out of the bag and started tearing off her clothes. But Rachel had enough self-respect to demand that she do it herself. Undressing and removing all her rings and necklace, she begged to be allowed to keep 1 ring, a gift from a close friend who had died in a car accident. But Anderson lacked the mercy to grant even this last request. The friends ordered the girl to kneel face down in the pit. Rachel knelt down for a short prayer. Seeing this, Anderson mockingly advised her not to worry about it, because she would soon meet him personally. Soon, Rachel's torment ended when she died from the bullets fired from her ex-boyfriend John Anderson's weapon. After emptying the entire magazine, the gang members buried the pit and calmly drove away. They didn't forget to drive the girl's car to her ex-boyfriend's house to frame an innocent person. No one in the town knew what had happened to Rachel apart from the members of the gang. Everyone believed that the girl had disappeared, and her search began almost immediately. She was searched for several days until a breakthrough occurred in the case. The police received a valuable tip from the mother of one of the gang members, Jeffrey Barth. In a conversation with Detective Scott Fenter, the woman mentioned that the guys almost always rode in a red Jeep owned by 17-year-old Matthew Durham. Initially, Matthew resisted, but not being a seasoned offender, he couldn't withstand the pressure of experienced investigators for long. The teenager agreed to show the police the place where the girl was killed. 10 days after the crime, Rachel's body was found. Matthew no longer resisted and named all his friends who were at the girl's grave that night. This led the police, with a search warrant, to the house where Rachel's nightmare began. In a pond, along with the adhesive tape and the girl's jewelry, including her favorite ring that she asked to be left with her, the murder weapon was found. Forensic examination confirmed that the bullets that killed the girl were fired from this weapon. Additionally, the police found clothing in the house that the criminals had tried to burn, and even the shovel they used to dig the grave for Rachel. One after another, law enforcement authorities built cases against 8 suspects, who shifted blame for the crime onto each other just to get away with lesser punishment. 5 of the suspects agreed to deals and shorter sentences in exchange for testimony in court against Anderson, 22-year-old John Whitaker, who helped dig the pit, and Yusuf, who was involved in planning the crime. In court, Morris recounted that shortly before Rachel's murder, she invited Yusuf and Anderson to a motel for a party. Anderson was busy, so Yusuf went to the motel with Whitaker. Perhaps Rachel just wanted to talk and justify herself in their eyes, but they grew suspicious when they saw familiar cars in the parking lot and movements behind the curtains in room 1. It was as if someone was watching them from a window, and the guys thought Rachel had conspired with a rival gang and lured them into a trap to be robbed or even killed. Witnesses at the trial indicated that Anderson's group was nervous because Rachel saw no harm in interacting with people who were disliked by the Northwest Mafia. One of the gang members warned her a few days before the murder that she needed to choose a side. The invitation to the motel only heightened tensions and raised further suspicions that she was working against them. There were even concerns that she might inform the police, so they planned a trap for her. On September 23rd, Maurice and Matthew invited Rachel to the house of 16-year-old Nathan Lovelace. Anderson and 2 other gang leaders planned to drive to the garage, wait for her arrival, and grab her. However, things did not go as planned when Nathan's father unexpectedly returned home. Anderson then ordered Matthew to take the girl to Yusuf's house, threatening him with punishment if he failed. The second attempt was more successful, and the girl was beaten, abducted, and eventually killed by her ex-boyfriend and her new friend. Maurice later confessed that he did not help or keep his promise to protect Rachel because he feared for his own life. As painful as it was for Rachel's relatives, they had to be present at every trial of the 8 criminals and repeatedly come face to face with her murderers. The defendants behaved despicably in court, and Anderson was the worst of them all. He mocked, recalls Rachel's sister. He showed no signs of remorse, smiled at the camera, and even allowed himself to turn and wink at us. John Anderson and John Whitaker were sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The gang leader Yusuf will spend 37 years in prison, while Maurice and Matthew will serve 25 years and 10 months. The other participants in the crime served no more than 10 years in prison. Each person involved in the abduction and murder had the opportunity to help Rachel, but they all failed her. It was a senseless and merciless killing of a girl by 8 heartless traitors who, intoxicated by rage and revenge, took an innocent life and condemned the family to endless mourning. It is not satisfaction, not victory. It is simply the end of the trial, admitted Bill Burkheimer after the trial. I will never forget the photo of the grave after they removed her body, and in the soil was a perfectly preserved imprint of her hands folded in prayer. And that is what gives me some kind of solace, he added.